One of the big challenges you will face leading into retirement is what's called the permission to spend problem. The permission to spend problem occurs when you've been a diligent saver and then you arrive at the point where you have to create retirement income out of your assets, and you simply can't give yourself permission either out of fear, anxiety, or lack of knowledge to actually spend the wealth you've accumulated. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how living off of dividend income in retirement can help solve or at least lubricate a portion of that permission to spend problem. I've done a few videos recently about this permission to spend problem, and you can watch them, and there's many elements that feed into this. But at the root, the main reason that we see clients don't give themselves permission to spend when they've diligently saved leading into retirement is because there's so many unanswered questions with how we curate and craft retirement income. See, when you are working, or if you own a business, you've had 20, 30, maybe 40 years to gain comfort and familiarity with how your income will be crafted, what day of the month it will hit your account, how it will be taxed, what's going to be left over to spend, maybe you'll get a bonus, right? There's all these questions that are nested that have already been answered with the situation you're familiar with. But now you're navigating the retirement risk zone, which is the 10 years prior to retirement or the first 10 years in retirement. And you're trying to solve this problem, which is how do I give myself permission to spend the wealth I've accumulated? And how do I craft an income out of my retirement portfolio? One of the big challenges here that we're going to address today, and I think this is the challenge that dividend income solves, is the predictability or the reliability of income situation, right? So now you're crafting your own retirement income, or you're planning for how to do that. And you have what I call tons of decision-making friction. You have a checklist of a whole bunch of things that you need answered, either consciously or subconsciously, about what's going to allow you to know you're making the best decision for how you're crafting your retirement income. And until you've knocked those items off the checklist, or at least improved your level of comprehension about those different items, you're going to have significant decision-making friction, which will in many cases disallow you or make it very difficult for you to actually spend the money that may be appropriate to spend. And the last thing that you want is to end up on your deathbed and regret having this huge pile of money, but not having used it during the years in which you were most able to maximize the value and the novelty and the benefit and pleasure of the wealth that you spent so many years and so much hard work saving. So let's get right into this. There are really several problems that characterize this, and I believe that dividend income can at least help with each component. So I'm going to show this on the screen. We'll talk through this piece by piece. The first problem here is very, very simple. So you really have two ways of crafting income in retirement. I mean, there's many, many ways, but at simplest form, the conventional wisdom presents us two ways. We either have what's called capital appreciation, or pruning the principal value of our investments, which basically you could consider that I have a total pool of $1 million of investments. I want to sell a portion of those investments each year to create the income I will need to live on. And then I simply have to ask myself, how much do I sell? What's the appropriate amount, right? The second method is income, right? And that conventionally has been, through dividend portfolios, or maybe buying bonds, or maybe having rental property, or even a business in retirement that kicks off a stream of income. Now, what we're comparing today is dividend income versus the more conventional wisdom, which is principal reduction, or selling a portion of your investments in order to produce your income. So problem number one is up here on the screen. Let's say you start with $1 million portfolio. You have $1 million portfolio, and now you have a set of nested decisions you need to make that could present decision-making friction and make it difficult for you to, again, solve this permission to spend problem if you've been a great saver. Let's say you have this $1 million portfolio. Well, you have to answer a bunch of questions before you can even decide what or when or how you're going to sell. You have to ask yourself, what's an appropriate amount of income to take from this $1 million portfolio? You're going to produce this little ball of income, and you have to ask yourself, what is the absolute dollar amount per year I'm comfortable taking? And then what is the percent of the portfolio I'm willing to take? We're not talking about the 4% rule here. We're not giving guidance on any of that stuff. It's just understanding. Problem number one is you have to ask yourself these questions. Problem number two, once you've addressed the question of how much income will I take each year, now you have to answer a whole bunch of questions, because on the screen we're showing, instead of just one portfolio that's $1 million, what you really have is one pie chart that is composed or comprised of many different investments. Maybe you follow an asset allocation, maybe you have individual stocks, maybe it's both, it doesn't really matter. But your portfolio is not one $1 million bucket of money, it's many buckets of money within that $1 million that are all have a different level of risk and different performance characteristics and different elements that, information that feed into how each of those elements perform. Now, problem number two is, once you've determined how much you're willing to take each year and what percent of your portfolio, you have to answer these questions. What do you sell in order to craft that income? How much of each thing do you sell in order to craft that income? When do you sell it? What happens if you decide to take your distributions annually? That's very different than taking your distributions quarterly, or very different than taking it monthly. And ultimately, you'll have to make decisions on your own about what frequency you want your distributions. And that is simply another nested question you have to answer for yourself that will undoubtedly provide or present decision-making friction and will make it difficult for you to have permission or feel your own permission to spend your money. So you have to answer all these questions, and we call that problem number 2, because it's not just determining a distribution rate, it's also all the mechanics that go into how you craft that income. What about problem number 3, which is what if you have a one-time expense, like a sudden expense? You've already decided how much you're comfortable taking out each year for your annual living costs or your annual spend. Well, what happens if your car dies, or you have a flood in a bathroom, or something happens to your home, or a kid who needs some financial support? And what happens if at the beginning of the year you have this $1 million portfolio on the left here, and you agreed on a 4% distribution, which is $40,000. And now by July, middle of the year, you've taken your monthly or quarterly distributions as planned, but all of a sudden you have a $30,000 one-time expense that comes up, and your portfolio has also gone down slightly that year, or it's just in the middle of the year doing, whatever choppy things it does. And now the portfolio is worth $972,000, and you need to take out this $30,000 sudden one-time expense. You're going to have a ton of decision-making friction there, and you're going to feel this gut-wrenching difficulty of how do I give myself permission to spend that money? So these are the 3 problems that occur when we use a principal to reduction method. Now on the screen here, I'm going to move to another visual here. The best way I like to think about living off of dividend income in retirement is it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You don't have to only live off of dividend income or only live off of principal reduction income. You can blend the two. But a really good analogy for how to think about dividend income is if you have a portfolio that's only invested in stocks that you don't get dividends from and you need to sell in order to get access to money, it's like owning an investment home or a investment property with no renter in it. When you have a dividend portfolio, it's like owning an investment property with renters in it. The comparison here is if you have an investment property worth $1 million, you can't just sell one corner of the house or one part of the house in order to get access to the money. Now with stock portfolio, you can, but you're going to feel that same decision-making friction, that same lack of permission to spend, because you actually have to sell at different unpredictable values of the portfolio, especially when it comes to one-time expenses. But having a dividend portfolio, or at least partial amount of your retirement portfolio in dividend producing investments, is like owning an investment property with renters. At least you're getting that rental income payment, right? And that can be very, very helpful in lubricating and relieving some of that decision-making friction. So a couple elements to kind of bring this to a close. The main objective of the dividend income, it's not about maximizing or squeezing out every single dollar or drop of profit. It's about giving you some element of predictability or stability to your retirement income, right? You come from this place in your life where you've maybe had a salary and you need to replace it. A stream of dividend income can be a very, very similar feel to having a salary. It boosts your predictable or stable sources of income. Maybe you have Social Security or an annuity or a pension. Those are going to feel really good because they're predictable, they're reliable, they come with a regular frequency. You know what day, what amount, how they're taxed, and when they hit. Dividend income can function very similarly. You can set up automatic dividend sweeps so that you get the dividend income swept to your account on a monthly or a quarterly or an annual basis, whatever is comfortable for you. But the benefit is you don't have all this decision-making friction where you have to decide, what do I sell? How much do I sell? When do I sell it? What if the portfolio is down? What if it's up? Which stocks do I sell, right? Huge questions that need to be answered. The dividend income is so frictionless because you don't have to answer all those questions. It's also very simple to understand how it will be taxed. We can do a whole nother video on how dividend income is taxed, but it's pretty straightforward. Most dividend income, that is what's called qualified dividends, will be taxed at long-term capital gains tax rates. So that as well can be favorable, assuming that the dividend income is in a taxable brokerage account. If it's in a retirement account, that's a different case. And we'll do a longer video on that. But without getting into the weeds of that, the idea here is dividend income can be a super helpful lubricating tool if you're suffering from the permission to spend problem. And we have a whole playlist dedicated to some videos that go through how to understand dividend income versus capital gains or appreciation or principal pruning income sources in retirement. You can watch that playlist up here, right up here above my finger if you're interested. I highly recommend at least understanding it. The idea of this video in summary is there's many ways to skin the cat and create a retirement income. And one of the primary objectives, it is really important that we try to figure out how to maximize or optimize your income in retirement. But also very important is creating a similar feel like comfort, a level of comfort and predictability to your income in retirement so that you don't have this latent anxiety about how you're going to get your money in retirement. So I hope you found this helpful. Again, I highly recommend watching the longer, more robust video series we've done on dividend income. It's also tied into concepts about asset allocation and other things. It's very interesting. We're giving away a free 6-part video series. It's our proprietary retirement planning process that we call Navigating the Retirement Risk Zone. In that video series, we talk about everything from your distribution rate, your required portfolio income, how you craft that income, what you track, how you measure your financial plan success, and how you monitor your plan ongoing. It's a very long 90-minute video series. We're giving that away in conjunction with our free access to our retirement planning tool, Right Capital. You can get all of that for free by clicking any form on our website, submitting your email address, and we'll send you the entire series for free, no strings attached. If you also feel called, you're more than welcome to schedule a free consultation with our fee-only fiduciary financial planning team, and we'd be very privileged to speak to you about your retirement planning needs. As always, thank you for your time and attention. We hope you enjoyed the video and see you in the next video.